The sky no longer sings. The wind, once full of stories and promises, now carries only silence and death. I write this letter to no one, or perhaps to some distant time when curious hands may find these words and try to understand who we were. Here, deep within this lead bunker, surrounded by concrete, echoes, and memories, my voice is the only thing that still resists being forgotten. It's been so long since I've heard another human being that I'm starting to doubt whether we still exist. But something within me insists on telling what happened, on telling who we were before the sky turned to acid and the daylight began to devour us. My name is Joana Thompson. I'm 50 years old, though the mirror, if there were still an unbroken one, might say more. Before all this, I was a professor of astrobiology in Seattle. I taught classes on extreme atmospheres, terraforming, and how life could emerge in places we once thought uninhabitable. Ironic, isn't it? I used to talk about Venus with a passion that rubbed off on my students. I showed infrared spectrum images, simulated atmospheres in the lab. I was part of a project with the Global Planetary Exploration Agency, a scientific dream that turned into a nightmare. I had a daughter, Maya, and a lavender garden on the balcony. In the summer, I loved reading under the morning sun while she played with the dog. His name was Newton. These days, I think a lot about that garden. The smell of wet soil, the sound of her laughter, the simple warmth of a world that was still livable. It's strange how, when faced with the end, the mind doesn't cling to great achievements, but to the little things: a child's hand holding yours, the touch of sunlight on skin, the smell of coffee while it rained outside. The past visits me like a gentle but persistent ghost. Sometimes I close my eyes and almost hear Maya's voice calling from the kitchen. But it's just the sound of the pipes humming with recycled air. I'm not special. I never was. I was just in the right place to survive. Or maybe the wrong one, if you really think about it. I have no answers, no plan, only time. Too much time. And that's why I write. Because my story, as ordinary as it may seem, is the story of all of us. It's what was left after the light, after the mistake, after losing everything that mattered. It all began the way most of humanity's greatest tragedies do, with a promise. Project Icarus was the pinnacle of aerospace engineering, a milestone in atmospheric exploration. The idea was simple and brilliant: to collect vapor from Venus's dense atmosphere and study it under controlled conditions, searching for energy and environmental applications. They said the suspended particles in the Venusian clouds could be the key to neutralizing toxic gases on Earth, maybe even reversing part of global warming. The world watched in awe as the first orbital drones began operating. I myself followed the data in real time, proud to contribute to the biological impact reports. For the first time in decades, science and hope walked hand in hand. And that was exactly where we went wrong. What we didn't know, or ignored, out of arrogance or haste, was that those particles wouldn't behave the same way here. They were unstable, reactive in ways our models didn't predict. When the first capsule returned to Earth and made contact with the atmosphere, it was like striking a match in a room filled with invisible gas. There was no explosion, not in the traditional sense, but the air began to change. The chemical reactions spread like an invisible plague, altering the atmospheric composition within hours. Scientists rushed to warn governments, but it was already too late. A gray mist took over the skies, and the sunlight, once a source of life, began to burn like acid. I remember the first morning the sun rose. Wrong. The light filtered through the clouds with a metallic hue, and the birds didn't sing. People began coughing. Some collapsed in the streets. The next day, anyone stepping outside without protection saw their skin begin to blister within minutes. It wasn't radiation. It was something new, corrosive, something carried by the very air. Our lungs, our skin, our biology. None of it was prepared. The collapse didn't come with screams, but with silence. A thick silence, as if the world had held its breath. And then, the cities began to empty. Hospitals collapsed within days. Makeshift shelters sprang up in underground parking lots, subway stations, armored garages. Those with access to bunkers, the military, billionaires, and, by strange coincidence, a few scientists involved with the project survived the first few months. The others, the majority, simply vanished. The sky grew more and more opaque until nothing could be seen beyond a thick layer of corrosive smoke. No more sirens, no more lights. The networks went down, and time stood still. I was at a testing facility in northern Canada when the air lockdown was declared. We were told not to leave, to seal all entry points. That's where I heard my daughter's voice for the last time. A nervous voice message saying she was going to her grandmother's house, that I should call her as soon as I could. I never got to reply. Communication was cut just hours later. And then, all that remained was the hum of the filtration system, the sound of air being recycled, and the unbearable certainty that we had condemned ourselves. Today, Earth is a hostile planet. The cities have become smoldering skeletons, their structures corroded by acid rain, their glass melted like concrete tears. Where there was once movement, there are now charred bones, shadows etched into the asphalt, remnants of a civilization that dared to play God. No one walks the streets anymore. There are no masks or suits capable of withstanding the fury of the new air. The sky remains shrouded in a thick fog, eternally gray, eternally still. Time here is measured in filtration cycles, in slowed heartbeats, in the silences between one memory and the next. We live buried, like relics refusing to disappear. My shelter is an old military bunker, lined with layers of lead and reinforced concrete. It was built to withstand nuclear war, not atmospheric collapse, but it serves its purpose. Here, food comes from canned goods and fungi grown in controlled humidity. Water is extracted from condensation and purified with filters that need to be replaced every 2 months, parts that will soon run out. I live under artificial light, with day and night regulated by a timer I try to follow, more for sanity than necessity. I don't know how many are still alive. Sometimes I pick up faint signals on abandoned frequencies, voices whispering Morse code or old songs. They're never clear. They never last long. What hurts the most is the absence of the sky. Not seeing the stars, not feeling real warmth, not knowing if the sun still rises. It slowly destroys us, like emotional rust. Human beings were made to look up, to walk in the light, to be warmed. Down here, we're only ghosts of what we once were. Emotions are numbed. Hope is a fragile plant that sprouts only in dreams. But even in this suffocating silence, something in me refuses to give in. Maybe it's instinct. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's just the memory of Maya, running through the lavender, beneath a sky that no longer exists. The hardest part isn't the silence, or the darkness, or the metallic cold that drips down the walls of this shelter. The hardest part is remembering. Remembering what we lost, what we destroyed with our own hands, with our arrogance disguised as science. I was part of it. I applauded when the Venusian sensors sent back their first data. I celebrated when the drones broke through the upper layer of Venus's atmosphere. And now, every acidic particle dancing out there carries a bit of our vanity. Guilt is a constant companion, silent, invisible, but present like the air I breathe in here. Sometimes I wonder if the knowledge was worth the price. If the answer to a cosmic question justified turning the planet into a grave. And yet, there is something inside me that refuses to die. A small part, almost childlike, that refuses to accept that it was all for nothing. Maybe it's the echo of my daughter's laughter, the scent of lavender, or the sound of the world before it fell apart. Sometimes I close my eyes and imagine that somewhere, someone else survived. That this letter, these words cast out against the end, might travel through time, reach another soul, and rekindle a spark. The world as we knew it is gone. But maybe, just maybe, there's still some humanity left in us. And if there is, it's here. in this regret that still knows how to love, in this fear that still wants to live, in this memory that refuses to fade. If one day this letter is found, whether in a distant tomorrow or by accident among the ruins of what we once were, I want you to know that we loved, that we laughed, that we cried in the rain and dreamed of the stars, that we made mistakes, yes, but not out of malice, out of desperation, haste, a longing for too much from a universe that may never have belonged to us. And if everything truly has come to an end, then let these words be the final whisper of our kind. We were not only destruction,